for this patient, which is also a class 3 modification 1, 2, remember we always classify according to the posterior saddle and if we are going to replace teeth. Now this patient had 2 centrals removed, and we've got a lateral and a lateral as abutments anteriorly. Posteriorly we've got premolars and molars. The challenge with lateral incisors is that they do not in most cases provide adequate support, and in this patient I will then, because I have canines and the canine is a nice firm sturdy root, I will use the canines to give support for the anterior saddle. So I will be designing a metal partial denture for this patient, who is also a class 3 modification 2. I have surveyed the model, I have found the undercuts on all the abutment teeth, and then the next step is to provide support. And in this case I will use my canines, a cingulum rest and a cingulum rest on the canines, because the anterior, this lateral incisors, may not be suitable or provide adequate support. I'm going to use my molars again for support, and in this case I'll be using mesial rest again because it is next to the saddles. The third step is to provide retention. This is a metal partial denture, so I will be using circumferential clasps again, and I've got my active arm engaging undercut. It's drawn outside of the line of the tooth, and my reciprocal arm that is not in the undercut area, providing reciprocation for the active arm. In the second quadrant I will also use a circumferential clasp, and my reciprocal arm that is reciprocating the action of the clasp. So I've got my 1, 2, 3, 4 rests. I've got my 2 clasp, one on either quadrant, and the next component is to connect the separate components. Now anteriorly I'm going to have to extend my denture over my canines and over my lateral incisors, and because I have 2 teeth I'm going to choose to relieve them. And this is how we show that we're relieving the 2 teeth. Remember, we cannot relieve only 1 tooth, that will create a food trap. We must have a space of at least 3 millimeters anteroposteriorly and towards the palate. Anteriorly I'm going to connect it, and I have to extend it over my lateral as well as over my canine to indicate that it is a cingulum rest. I'm going to relieve my 2 teeth again, and I'm connecting. Posteriorly my major connector, and there I have connected all the components. I have to indicate that it's a metal denture, and anteriorly I'll have my acrylic finish line with my retention holes for my acrylic, as well as posteriorly to indicate to the technician that this is a metal partial denture. We're only using 0.25 undercut on a circumferential clasp, which is chrome cobalt. And then I look at whether I have provided enough horizontal stability, whether I have provided or instructed the technician to make a proper or construct a proper major connector. So anteriorly, instead of using the laterals, I have now used my canines. I've got 2 mesial rests on my molars, so that will be satisfy the principle of having at least 3 rests. I've got my 2 clasp, 1 in each quadrant. I have connected all my components. I have provided, or in the clinic I will build up to provide a 0.25 undercut if I did not have adequate undercut, and this will be my metal partial denture. another design, another type of clasp that I could have used. If we look at this one, exactly the same, where we have used the canines. And on the 2-7, because I had a bigger undercut mesiobuccally, I have now used a ring circumferential clasp compared to the normal circumferential clasp. And this is also for a metal partial denture. In the case where the patient required an acrylic, or if an acrylic partial denture was indicated, if we look at the design, I have also used my 2 canines for support, and I've used my molars, and in this case I have used a C-clasp engaging distal undercut on the molar, a 0.5 undercut with a 1 mm stainless steel. I have attached my half round wire rest to provide support for my saddle. So I have my 1, 2, 3, 4 rest again. I have my 2 clasps, and I have connected all the components. Now if we look at a acrylic partial denture, this will be a C-clasp that is constructed, that is made out of stainless steel, and we have a half round wire mesial rest in this case. So this is what it will look at in the clinic or in practical, and a C-clasp engaging the distal undercut with a mesial occlusal rest. In the second quadrant in this denture, I have a distal occlusal rest again, and the same with a C-clasp. And this is one of the weak areas of the acrylic because it is a mechanical joint. So the acrylic, if the patient and if the technician and the dentist are not careful, can actually fracture. If we look at another design, so this we will have a C-clasp again on a molar. That will be a C-clasp on a premolar, and there is a distal occlusal rest on the canine. And as one can see, the canine with acrylic partial dentures, we always have more coverage of the tissues because acrylic is a weak material and it needs to be bulky to provide some resistance to fracture and to provide some rigidity. So this will be the acrylic partial denture.